welcome to Hershey. I don't know where the other folks are, but it's their launch. Because this is, well, let me ask you this. Has anybody done the trolley, ridden the trolley tour before, been on with us ever? No? Oh, okay. Well, you might in that case be wondering, well, what is this Trolley Works that we signed up and paid, good money to ride? And I always like to say, just to keep it brief and not go on and on about it, Hershey Trolley Works is simply the finest sightseeing tour you'll ever be on. Really, I can't think of a more concise way to say it than that. So there you go. And if you don't believe me, just ride along with me for the next hour or so, and I think we'll all come to the same conclusion towards the end. My name is Kurt, and I'll be your conductor here this early afternoon, this Tuesday, as we go around Hershey, Pennsylvania. Kids, if you like the job I do on the trolley, if you think it was fantastic, you can always feel free to refer to me by my superhero name, which is Superconductor Kurt. Very electrifying. Okay, and our motorman today is none other than the lovely and talented and always resilient motorman Mike. Yet again, scoring the spontaneous round of applause before we even left the parking lot. So we will be taking you safely and happily through the town of Hershey, Pennsylvania today, and seeing and feeling, and when you get back, tasting the inspirational story of Mr. and Mrs. Hershey. By the way, before we say anything else, thank you very much for A, taking a vacation in 2020. We super duper appreciate that. And B, that you came to Hershey. And C, of course, that you chose to spend your hard-earned money to ride the trolley with us. And I really do hope that when it's all said and done, you're like, yeah, man, that was something. That was worth it. So that's the goal. Where are we right now? Well, we are at Hershey's Chocolate World. So you've already done one good thing. You've come to Hershey's Chocolate World. Which is what lots and lots of people do each year. And of course, as I'm giving you statistics and numbers, especially when they're big numbers, and I'm talking about years and years of numbers, let's have an agreement amongst ourselves that we're just going to forget that this year ever happened. And we're just going to push it off to the side and talk about every single other year that's not 2020. So normally, and probably still this year, Chocolate World is the most popular corporate visitor center plant tour that there is in the world, mind you. We get about 4 million people each normal year that come through, and they ride the little tour that shows you how they make Hershey's chocolate in the plant. And of course, this is the no-brainer as to why it's the most popular. When you finish, you get a little sample of Hershey's chocolate as if you had just been, through the plant. Just like it was in the old days. The original factory stopped giving public tours in 1972, and Chocolate World was built in 1973. A lot of people wish for the old days. However, let me just flavor that for you a little bit. In that last year, 1972, they were getting 1 million people a year who wanted to tour the original the actual physical plant. And that sounds pretty cool and pretty popular, but if you think about it, that's 1 million people a year who are literally standing right next to open vats of melted chocolate that's being produced. And the temptation to just go, I wonder what it tastes like now, is just too great for so many people. That for the sake of higher consistency of purity for everyone, and also less lines, we got Chocolate World. So we got Chocolate World is the center of Hershey as far as visiting and chocolating. Then you've also got Hershey Park that's right next to us. Chocolate World can see about 25,000 people during the course of a summer day. That's pretty normal for us. And the park would be about that as well. More on weekends, you could get well up over 30,000 easily. And that's without our concert series, which we are unfortunately without this summer. Several times when we're close by here, you'll be able to look across and see a huge stadium that everybody wonders what that is. That's where our concerts normally go on in the summer outdoors. They could be everybody on the musical spectrum, from the Zac Brown Band to Leonard Skinner to Kendrick Lamar and everybody in between. And that could be, another 30,000 people in there. And of course, there's this indoor facility that's next to us on the left-hand side. That's the Giant Center. It is giant, and it is home to the AHL Hershey Bears. That's our local hockey team. Oh yes, we have a local hockey team. They are a minor league team for the Washington Capitals, and they're very successful, one of the most successful teams in the league, and one of the oldest teams in the league. The Hershey Bears go all the way back to 1936, when Mr. Hershey himself organized the team and called them the Hershey Bars. That was his name. Now he meant it as like B''ARS, like there's like Yosemite Sam, like there's a bar out there, something like that. But the league said, no, we can't do that, Mr. Hershey. And so he changed the name to the Bears. That's what we have in there now. And they also do lots of indoor concerts. We went and saw the Pentatonics Christmas concert. We saw two cellos. We've seen Cirque du Soleil. People that I know with lots of little kids go to, if it starts with Disney and ends with On Ice, it's been at the Giant Center at some point. Ballerinas on ice, monkeys with bananas on ice, everything on ice. That's chilled mixed drinks on ice. I don't think that was a Disney production, but anyway, it's all been through the Giant Center. So, and that's in addition to the huge RV show that we have come through here every year, and the even huger antique auto show. All this to say, Hershey, an insanely popular tourist spot, visitation spot for everybody to come to. So you made a wise choice in coming here yourselves. But you can contrast that with the actual town of Hershey, where Motorman Mike and I both live, which only has about 24,000 people. We are not a huge, raging metropolis by any stretch of the imagination. Just a regular, old, small town in the middle of Pennsylvania, except for all of the things that make it different, which is what the rest of this tour will be about. But we're still normal guys. We like our normal town. And so here we go. Now, over here on your left-hand side, you can see, sorry, I don't know why I'm crackling there. I wanted to hit in the shield and try to keep it closer when I know. Over here, there's a huge manufacturing facility. That is the West Hershey Chocolate Factory. I mention it now, we're going to get closer and closer to it until we're literally right up next to it. So you don't worry that I'm forgetting about it. We're just going to get up there in a few minutes. And it's also a good opportunity to point out that we've invested in these huge sightseeing windows, and you're on a sightseeing tour. So you never have to feel obligated to look at me during this tour. Lord knows, and Mike reminds me, I'm not Mike to look at. So you can always just look out, enjoy the scenery, and I will tell the story and not feel offended. Okay, now we got to do a little history though while we get to West Hershey. This will be a quick lightning round history quiz that will get us to where we need to go. And it won't be too painful, I promise. So just for frame of reference, you already got Chocolate World right, so I think you're going to get this one. Everyone right now on the trolley is in the state of, you can shout it out. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, exactly right, 100% well done. Pennsylvania, okay, was founded by one particular dude, and his name was? William Penn. Just 2 for 2. You guys are doing great. William Penn, it literally means Penn's Wood. That's what Pennsylvania means. Now we get a little tricky. It's important to know that William Penn was a particular religious denomination, a Christian denomination that founded Pennsylvania. William Penn was a Quaker. Quaker. So somebody in the back who's got it, well done. And why is that important? Well, the Quakers were a religious minority in England, which is where the Penns were from, and they were persecuted, so much so that lots of them wanted to get out. And they didn't really care for the English nobility. They didn't tip their hat to the king. They didn't want to serve in the military. And this was upsetting to the king because William Penn's father was an admiral in the Navy. And he said, how about we get your kid out of here and send him to the New World? Let's give him a colony. And so they did. Now, the reason it's important is that it was a very tolerant colony, especially religiously, let all kinds of groups of people in. And one of the groups that came in was, now we're getting difficult, a group of disciples of a guy named Menno Simons. And Menno Simons founded the Mennonites. Boy, these guys are smart. The Mennonites. Why do we care about the Mennonites? Because one Mennonite family that came here was named the family of Christian Hershey. They came here from the Swiss Alps, and when they got here in the 1700s, they Americanized their name and they became the Hershey family. 1826, Isaac Hershey homesteaded a huge farm a couple miles down the road. It went to his children, and then to a guy named Henry Hershey, who married his sweetheart, Veronica Buckwalter Snavely Hershey, in 1856. And then in 1857, on September 13th, they had a little bitty boy, and his name was Milton S. Snavely, his mother's name, Milton S. Hershey. And that's our Mr. Hershey. That's our guy, born September 13th, 1857. Phew! It took a lot to just get that out of the way, but now you at least have the context, and here we have arrived at the factory. This is the West Hershey plant that you've been gazing at for a little while. Everything you can imagine about what must it be like to make over 3 million pounds of chocolate every day. That's what's going on in there, because it's pretty fantastic. You've got the people in their lab coats, going through the jets that brush all the microbes off of them, and they enter the clean environment where no one is sticking their finger in a vat of chocolate. In fact, it's not really touched by human hands at all. The kiss lines. If you ride the free tour and you see the conveyor belts of like, here go the Hershey bars, here are the Kit Kat bars. It really is like that with Hershey Kisses. One kiss wide, they go shooting down this conveyor belt, and little like billiard cues on computers find the imperfect ones and ping them off the line there, and they go back down and get remelted, and they try it all again. So the factory produces over 80 million Hershey Kiss shaped products every single day. That's a lot. Let's break that down. The factory produces 900 Hershey Kisses every second. There's about 3,000 kisses that just got made as we sat there contemplating it. Now let me ask you this, especially you kids on the trolley. Could you eat 900 Hershey Kisses, even if we gave you longer than a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes? Would you at least be willing to try?
Yes.
Good. That's the important thing. You get the E for effort. You've earned that badge. Fantastic. Now sometimes I'll say kisses and sometimes I'll say kiss-shaped products. Why on earth would I waste the breath saying kiss-shaped products? Well, let's go back in time. Mr. Hershey invented the Hershey Kiss in 1907. Insanely popular right from the very get-go. Okay, so if you make a product named the Kiss and everyone loves it, your next idea is, well, we ought to have a hug. Yeah, but he didn't really have the idea for the hug except for the name. Okay, that's not the first guy that's happened to. So they kept the name, the hug, hanging around. In 1985, so decades later, they said, okay, I think we've got it. We're going to take the Kiss, we're going to put an almond in it, and then wrap it in a different color, gold instead of silver, and there you go, Kisses and hugs. Well, when they unwrapped it, they all looked the same. So they went, nope, back to the drawing board, we got to try again. Now we're up to 1993, and some genius says, how about this? How about we take a milk chocolate center, and then we hug it in white chocolate that looks like a kiss, but it's white chocolate. And then we hug that with a drizzle of milk chocolate again. Now it's like a hug within a hug. And everyone went, Eureka! That's it! We're going to do it! Except we're going to have to build a factory to do it. So that's why they built the West Hershey plant in 1993, so that they could produce the hugs and lots of other stuff. Today that factory makes all kinds of milk chocolate products. Milk chocolate almonds, chocolate bars, chocolate syrup, the kiss-shaped products, etc. And again, I say kiss-shaped products because after that, they, especially in the early 2000s, went on a huge spree of trying anything that they could in a Hershey Kiss, like all kinds of crazy flavors that appeal to the American market, the international market, everywhere in between. The ones that stuck, the Kiss with caramel, the dark chocolate Kiss, the Kiss with almonds, the hugs, the cookies and cream Kiss, and one of my favorites, the cherry cordial Kiss, comes out at Christmas time. And as soon as they hit the floor in Chocolate World, I usually buy about 20 bags just to make sure that I have got my Christmas supply for the rest of the year. Not that the rest of you aren't important, but I'm taking care of me in that respect. So, not only do we have that factory, but now, ladies and gentlemen, you can see on your left-hand side, or your right-hand side, sorry, your right-hand side, another factory in this town. Well, what does this one make? This is the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup factory. Oftentimes people are stunned to silence, just like you folks, when they consider that they're just about 50 feet from 5 million Reese's Peanut Butter Cups being made. Boom! The thin cups, the regular cups, the mini cups, the king cups, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, as many as you can possibly dream about being made. That factory has been there since 1954. But it's also in the same area of town, right across the railroad tracks from the West Hershey plant. So we've just done a big hairpin turn, and now you can see Reese's and West Hershey are literally right next to each other, which is a good time to think about the fact that all around you right now, there's about 5 million pounds of Hershey's chocolate being made. So you are really you are at the epicenter of the world of Hershey's chocolate, or as I would just say, chocolate, right? So that's why we call ourselves the sweetest place on earth. It is a clever marketing slogan, yes, absolutely. But per capita, because we only have 24,000 people in town, you can safely say that mathematically we are the sweetest place on earth for a person. So that's the chocolate of today. In just a moment, we're going to be swinging to the left. And so if you look out to the right past the Friendly's restaurant, which this one is also owned by the Hershey Company, by the way, past the Friendly's restaurant is the Tech Center. The Hershey Technical Center is the Hershey chocolate of tomorrow. So what are they making in there right now? I have absolutely no idea. I couldn't tell you. When it hits the shelves, then we'll know. It's all a big secret. So whatever is the next big thing, some genius in there is in there right now going, Eureka! I got it!
That should be Andrew's job.
Orange Kit Kats. No, they've already tried that. Who knows? Green tea infused Hershey Kits. They've already tried that too. It's already in there. So there's no shortage of ideas, I suppose. So you got the Hershey of today, you got the Hershey of tomorrow. And what we're going to do now, we're going to turn on Chocolate Avenue. Oh yes, I said Chocolate Avenue. That is our main street here in town. There is no main or market streets in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Our main street is called Chocolate Avenue, and I'll show you why. Prime example of why we can call it Chocolate Avenue in just a minute. But again, in case you somehow missed it, West Hershey and the Reese plant right next to each other one more time. And I am going to jump back into the story of Milton Hershey, because all we've done so far is have him be born. And surely there must be more to the story than that, which there is. So here we go. There's three things you want to know about Milton Hershey's early life. Unfortunately, none of them are good, but I'll tell you what they are. One, didn't have a lot of money. Family didn't have a lot of money. Two, not a lot of education for Mr. Hershey back in those days, okay? And three, he experienced a tragedy that kind of rocked the family world even before he was 10 years old. So let me unpack those for you here a little bit, and we'll set the table. Not a lot of money. Okay, so Henry Hershey, I said, moved into the family homestead, the farm, back in 1856. However, what I didn't tell you, that Henry Hershey had no intention of being a farmer. He was a dreamer, man. He was going to be like an Elon Musk type. He was going to set the world on fire with some crazy idea that would revolutionize everything. Unfortunately, he did not do that, and so as a result, there was not a lot of money in the family. Just to give you an example, he thought they were going to strike it rich in oil in western Pennsylvania. He also thought that he would strike it rich by inventing medicated cough drops, by inventing coin-operated vending machines, by designing trout hatcheries. He had an idea for a perpetual motion machine. He was always with the ideas. So not a lot of money. But they followed Henry Hershey around on his adventures, and so Milton Hershey went to a school at each stop where they were. So he went to about 7 different schools starting his educational career. So we only got about a 4th or 5th grade education somewhere in there. So not a lot of education. And then the third thing is that they had a little girl. Her name was Serena. So it was Milton and Serena in the 1860s. But scarlet fever swept through the area when she was only about 4 years old, and she died of that disease. There were no hospitals in the area. She was not strong enough to fight off the infection. So Milton Hershey lost his kid sister and had that sense of aloneness, for the rest of his childhood. He was an only child. And we'll go more into that a little bit later. So those are the 3 things that set the stage for Mr. Hershey's early life. Dropped out of school. Fortunately, and here we can all tip our hats to Mama Hershey, she enrolled him as an apprentice to a candy maker when he was 14 years old. And Mr. Hershey got in there with a guy named Joseph Royer in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he kind of did some hands-on learning how to make caramels and ice cream and lemon drops and sweet treats of all kinds. And they both found that Milton Hershey was very, very good at it. He had the knack. He knew what he was doing. He was about a lot of book smarts. And so he spent 4 years there. And then he was nearly 19 years old, and it was 1876. So he went to Philadelphia for the nation's centennial, and he set up a business right there on Spring Garden Street. And in 1876, that was a pretty savvy idea. There was a huge party going on, and business was good. But 1877, 8, 9, and on, the sugar market was extremely volatile, business was tough, and by 1882, Mr. Hershey had worked himself to complete exhaustion and bankruptcy. The business closed in 1882. So his father said, why don't we go to Denver and we're going to strike it rich in silver mining? They did not strike it rich in silver mining. But Mr. Hershey met up with a local candy maker out there who taught him a very important secret. The secret of how to add fresh milk into his candies, make them chewier, tastier, and longer lasting. Now hold on to that in your brain, milk, because it's super important later on. Okay, we're here on Chocolate Avenue. You can see there's Hershey street lights. That's the thing about Chocolate Avenue. All up and down the road here, every street light is topped with a Hershey Kiss. We're really close to the center of town here, and if you can't see them very well when they're right over our heads, when we turn from Chocolate onto Cocoa Avenue, oh yes, I said Cocoa Avenue, you'll actually see the whole row out your side windows going off in either direction. So our main street is Chocolate, and this street is Cocoa, but it doesn't end there. The next street that we're going to cross is going to be Caracas Avenue, just one block down, and then we're going to see Granada Avenue, and after that, Arriba Avenue. The ones that we won't see right away are Trinidad, Bahia, Ceylon, and Para Avenues that are also here in town. Here comes Caracas, right up here, and then Granada and Arriba. Now these are all street names that you probably don't have in your town. But they're all street names that are places in the world, and these are places where we get... Someone said chocolate. I thought I had covered that. Chocolate comes from the factory. But cocoa beans is correct. Cocoa beans come from all these places, and they go to the factory, and we make them into chocolate. So, right from the get-go, Mr. Hershey laid out these houses here for workers in the factory, and the street names that comprised what he referred to as Chocolate Town, USA. That was his idea right from the beginning. Wanted to make absolutely sure that he set up this unique model town, and that is exactly what happened. Now we do have other streets. We have an elm and a maple and all the rest of it like normal towns, but in the center of town, that's all the cocoa streets there. Mr. Hershey also set up the area on our left-hand side as a community and cultural center for the town. So when he was laying it out, he wanted all the schools and the community stuff to be, everybody come into the center, and that's where it all happened. So you can see out the back, our elementary, middle, and high schools are against that next road there. It's a consolidated school district, Hershey Elementary, Hershey Middle, Hershey High School. And then you've got right next to us here the community center, recreational center, which is the future home of the next incarnation of the Hershey Pool, which is just a hole in the ground at the moment. The total renovation of that building. And then the Hershey Public Library is off to our left. That's the next building, which, by the way, is where the lovely and talented Mrs. Conductor Kirk is a children's librarian. And like I said, the school's in the back where we sent our 4 kids. So for 19 years they were imprisoned and stayed educated in the Hershey school system and now graduated. So all the things about, are we going back to school? Are we going back to school? Are we doing 3 days, 5 days, half days? We're like, you know what? Not our thing anymore. Thank you and goodbye. All we've got to do is worry about college. Easy. Okay, so we're going to turn left and head up this hill. Again, if you look out to the left, you get a continuing nice view of that area with the schools and everything, and the Hershey as it is for the folks who live in Hershey today. And while we do that, I'm going to jump back to the story of Mr. Hershey and the history, because we said that he was bankrupt, which may have been unexpected for you, and then silver mining, and then something about milk, and here we go. Mr. Hershey tried again visiting other cities and discovering it wasn't really good business opportunities around, and then finally in 1884 moving himself to New York City. He figured if he could make it there, make it anywhere. He went bankrupt in New York City 2 years later in 1886. Now he was absolutely dead broke, not a penny to his name for all those penny-a-piece caramels that he had made, and there were only 2 people that still believed in it. One was his mother, and the other was her sister, Aunt Martha, Maddie Snapewood. So he went back to the Lancaster area and said, you know, I think I'm going to try one more time. And Aunt Maddie said, okay, I will mortgage the house, and you try one more time. And so Milton did. And it looked for a while as though Aunt Martha was going to lose the house because it wasn't going very well. Sugar bills extremely volatile, sales, you never knew what was going to happen. Until just days before the bank was coming to foreclose, a visiting merchant, candy merchant from England came to Lancaster and went through and tasted different wares, and he tasted Mr. Hershey's candies, and he said, These are chewier and tastier and longer lasting than anything else that I've had. Now, we trolley riders know that's because they're made with milk. Exactly right. And so the guy said to Mr. Hershey, look, I think you've got something here. If these are still fresh when we unload them in London, I'll pay for the whole boatload. Absolutely. I'll pay you 500 pounds and we'll clear all of your debts and you'll be on your feet. Mr. Hershey said, that's great. No problem. We can do that. Of course, there was a huge problem. Mr. Hershey only had 2 employees, his mother and her sister, Aunt Mattie. And he didn't have enough machinery or men or anything working for him to make a boatload of candy. So he had to go down to the bank and say, hey, look, could you consider an alternative plan where you loan me some more money because I promise the check is in the mail? Well, thank goodness for all of us. In this one case, the check really was in the mail. And Mr. Hershey was good to his word. He made the candies that he promised he would make. They were still fresh when they got off the boat. He received his check, he paid his debts, and within 4 years of that date, because of his success then and his unique candy, he was one of the wealthiest men in Lancaster. However, he still had never made a single drop of chocolate. This was all candies and caramels and sweet treats of all kinds. So the chocolate comes later. How much later? I'll tell you a little bit, not just yet. Totally switch gears now with me, folks. Look up here on your left-hand side. There's a beautiful building with a dome up there that's called Founders Hall. I think it's this thing. Let me change my apparatus here because I don't want to completely plug you guys out. The Founders Hall is up there on the hill, and that is the headquarters of Milton Hershey School, which is a completely different part of the story. For that, we have to introduce Mrs. Hershey. So Mr. and Mrs. Hershey were married in 1898. They met 2 years earlier in a candy store. Shocker of all shockers. So they met, they fell in love, they married in 1898. You can see the school taking shape around us here. In 1909, they realized they were never going to have any children, which was devastating. They loved children, they wanted to have a family, it was not going to happen. So in that year, Mrs. Hershey, Catherine, who everybody called her Kitty, suggested that they should instead start a school for orphan boys. And that's exactly what they did. The next year, 4 orphan boys, 2 sets of brothers, moved into the Hershey homestead, built by Isaac, lived in by Mr. Hershey's father, and that's when Mr. Hershey was born in 1857. They moved into the homestead with a set of house parents who were their teachers and their family, and that was the humble beginnings of what we now call Milton Hershey School, which is literally everything around us. So the building you were looking at on the way up the hill was the high school. Before that was the elementary school. And this is the headquarters of the school. This is Founders Hall. So the cafeteria is in here, and the theater is in there, and a bunch of other stuff as well, and this beautiful, huge rotunda that is normally open to the public so that you folks can find out more about Milton Hershey School. As you might have guessed, it's not open at this moment because there's a gigantic construction project going on. The last update I got from the school was that they were hoping in November they'd be able to open up, just in time for 2021. And then you can go through, see the exhibits. Usually the hosts of the interactive exhibits are alumni of the school, and they can answer lots of in-depth questions about what it's like to really be a kid here, to spend your childhood here, and that's Founders Hall. As we scoot forward, you'd be able to look back a little bit and see the high school and the elementary school and the campus that's right here. As I said, everything around here is Milton Hershey School. It's thousands of acres on this central campus. They've grown from 4 boys in 1909 to over 2,000 students today. It is 100% residential, so they all live here, and it's one of the largest private residential schools of its kind in the country. And I say of its kind because, again, it is purely residential. Even if you decide to commit to sending your kindergartner here, and you live in just California, they're living here here for the whole 9 months. So this is the Alumni Memorial Grove. The school's been around for over 100 years, and so they commemorate the passing of any alumni in that family here each year. Also a good place for prom pictures and homecoming pictures and wedding pictures and anything else that requires a picture. And if you look out now to your right-hand side, I'm going to do another one of those moments where you got to remember something in your memory banks for a few minutes before it becomes vital as to why I pointed out to you. It's this very lonely-looking farmhouse out ahead of us to your right. Just cast your gaze on that, and I'll come back to it in a minute. So how did this get from 4 boys to 2,000 students and 160 student homes in the giant operation that it is today? Well, it was because of the farms, at least in part. Mr. Hershey purchased over time up to 50 local dairy farms by the time of the Depression, and had thousands, tens of thousands of acres of land. They've built student homes on the farms, so the boys would actually live and experience farm life, but also have the stability and the education that the student home and the school provided. And they also learned how to work a dairy farm. In fact, for a number of years, lots of years, the kids would milk the cows, the trolleys would come by exactly like we're doing, the cans would get loaded through the sides, and the Milton Hershey School milk would become part of Hershey's milk chocolate. Also, the Gizmodile is over here on our right-hand side. It has no connection to the Milton Hershey School as part of this tour, but they parked it there, so it's always worth, it is a sightseeing tour. You gotta point out the Gizmodile. Okay, so the school has changed a lot over the years, but some things have remained the same. It's still residential. For instance, this is where your high school seniors live. Now, and unlike the early days, most of these kids are going to college next year. So they're starting to get used to dorm life, managing your laundry, managing your groceries, all that stuff. But they still have to complete one of their certifications, just like the early days. It could be automotive, could be culinary, could be IT, any number of things. But that's where these guys live. And then ahead of us, to your right, the gray building at the end of this block is, for my money, the most important building in Hershey. This is the Hershey Homestead. So this was built by Isaac in 1826, and then Milton was born here September 13, 1857. Milton and Catherine founded the school here in 1909, and as a bonus, this is also the birthplace of Hershey's milk chocolate, which happened in a barn behind the homestead. The barn is long, long gone, but it was an experimental laboratory where Mr. Hershey created Hershey's milk chocolate. Now that's a different part of the story. Let's just leave that for a second, because right now I sense that you, the audience, because you're so smart, are filled with doubt that maybe I have been making things up. Because you look at that house, and you remember that I explicitly said how poor Mr. Hershey was in his early life. And you're going, these two things do not add up. That beautiful, huge house with landscaping and a 4-car garage, etc. And however poor he must have been. Okay, well, now's where you've got to remember that lonely farmhouse that I showed you right before we got to the homestead. Because that's exactly what the homestead looked like in 1857. A regular, plain, square, limestone farmhouse, no frills, no nothing. It's been added to so many times over the years because it's been part of the school for so many years. Today, the president of the school lives there with his family. Okay, all these neighborhoods over here, these are all student homes. So every house has about 8 to 12 kids living in it with a set of house parents. They are their teacher, or their family. They don't have to be their teachers anymore. And they provide the stability of the home life, which is a core mission of the school. Because the kids that come here today, while they do not have to be orphaned children, they don't have to be boys either. The first girls came in 1976. Very much still they come from families where finances are probably pretty rough, if we're being honest with each other, probably well below the poverty line. And there are probably other complicating factors as well, such as the neighborhoods where the kids are coming from. Oftentimes the schools are not that great. Lots of times there are extra complications in the family. Somebody has died, somebody has left or lost a job, or something has kind of rocked their world. They might not even be living with their parents at that moment. I mean, most of us are adults. Life is a mess sometimes, and people in the middle of that mess with kids are the most eligible to send those kids to the amazing opportunity that is Milton Hershey School. Now, I hope as I've given you that description that you're saying to yourselves again, now wait a second, that description sounds very much like someone else that this guy mentioned on our tour who had a very rough childhood with little money, little education, and a tragedy early on. And that person is, of course, Milton Hershey. Milton Hershey grew up, became the Mr. Hershey that we knew, and said, you know what, that was awful. I don't want anyone to have to go through that in their own childhood if I have any say in it, and of course he did. and that is why he and Catherine started the school. The last thing I want to tell you about the school right now is that it is absolutely free to the kids that come here. They can come in by their 4th birthday or up to their 16th birthday, and they can stay through high school graduation. Lots of times sets of siblings will come in. That's how the younger kids usually are enrolled. They're the younger sibling of someone else in a middle grade who's starting in. Yeah, if both or multiple kids from the family are there, that family does not pay or owe 1 penny for that kid's education for the whole time that they're here. And it's a high quality education. It doesn't even end with high school. And they monitor the kids' grades, conduct, and effort through high school, and they're awarded generous scholarships to where they can get accepted for college as well. Now again, we're adults mainly on the trolley. We know that Econ 101 tells us that there is no free lunch, free education, or free anything. So how does this all get paid for? Well, that's a very interesting question, but I'm not going to tell you the answer. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit later on. You're going to have to hang on that cliff for a little bit here. Okay, we're back at the center of town. So we've come back to Caracas Avenue. Beautiful home on your left side here is the home of Mr. Muri. He was the first president of the chocolate company. And then this home here is the home of Mr. Hershey, not our Mr. Hershey, Mr. Ezra Hershey, his cousin, who was the first treasurer of the board of directors. Actually, a couple of other much more recent factory chocolate company presidents have lived in some of these homes around here. And then at the bottom of the hill, once we make this turn right there, this is the home of John Snyder. Not the Dukes of Hazzard actor, John Schneider, but John Snyder, Mr. Hershey's lawyer, who helped him with all those things that it's difficult to do if your own education is so little. He's laid out building a factory, organizing a rail line, all that stuff. So that's why Mr. Snyder ended up with this beautiful home here right on Chocolate Avenue. Yes, we've come back to Chocolate Avenue. Here it is. You can get another close-up look at the Hershey Kiss streetlights. And the next thing we'll be generally gazing at and considering, in addition to Mr. Hershey's mansion, is the original chocolate factory. So the next turn we make, you'll be able to see the whole row of streetlights, and they kind of end at this giant building out there that'll be on your left. That is the original chocolate factory. So let's get us set up for that historically. Okie dokie. So I said Mr. Hershey became a millionaire, never even made a drop of Hershey's milk chocolate. Chocolate was a very expensive European luxury item in those days. Almost no one in America had had chocolate. But Mr. Hershey, like I just said, had become a millionaire in the caramel business. So he could afford things that not all of us could afford back in those days. And he tasted chocolate, and he liked it. And he said, you know what? I could do this. Absolutely. I could come up with my own milk chocolate recipe. I could use milk, and create something new. And not only will I make it delicious, I will make it so that anybody can afford it. And that's how we ended up at the homestead with the experimental laboratory, working for 2 years, day and night, 20 hours a day, until finally in 1899, he came up with the recipe for Hershey's milk chocolate. Whew, thank goodness he did that. The first product he created the next year was the Hershey bar. And he sold the Hershey bar for a nickel. 5 cents. 5 cents, ladies and gentlemen, got you a Hershey bar for a country that had never tasted chocolate before. Do you think they were popular? Do you think they sold like hotcakes?
No.
I think they sold like Hershey bars is what I think. And so he made the decision then to get out of caramels entirely and devote his future to Hershey's milk chocolate alone, even though it was a brand new product. He believed in it, and he believed in doing things in a big way. So he ended up building the world's largest chocolate factory, which we'll see yet again in just a few moments. But before we do that, as we head up this hill here, let's go back to Mrs. Hershey a second. So, I just want to make sure they weren't going to chip through a window on the trolley. Not very often, but it does happen. Okay, so Mrs. Hershey in 1905 said to her husband, she said, honey, I think it's great what we're doing here. The business is a success, the factory's going, the town is growing. I love that we live here in this heritage spot where you were born, your birthplace. I love that your mom lives here with us. I love that your dad shows up from time to time. Never exactly know when he's going to be here or when he's leaving. I think that's all great, but I wonder if maybe we can envision a future together where we have our own house and maybe your parents don't live there. And, just noodle that for me. And Mr. Hershey, very, very wise man, said, now all you wise men on the trolley, prick your ears up. He said, honey, that's a great idea. I'm going to get right on that. And so he built her this house. I'll say that one more time for the fellows on the trolley as well. He built her this house. There you go. Beautiful, stunning 22-room home here on the highest little hill that overlooks the factory and the growing town. And so they called it the High Point Mansion. It has 22 rooms, which is a lot. It's a lot of rooms. But if you consider the older multimillionaires of the Hershey era, the Vanderbilts of Biltmore for a great example, this would be like the carriage house, to those guys, the servants' quarters. This is nothing, man. But it is still a beautiful limestone mansion, and it was finished in 1908. And the things that people want to know are how much did it cost and who lives there now? Well, I can tell you. Mr. Hershey laid out a grand total in 1908 of $53,433 for this house. So entirely affordable, really, truly. And the Hersheys are the only people that have ever resided in the High Point Mansion. After they both passed away, it's been offices ever since. The Hershey Trust is located there today, and I'll tell you about the trust a little bit later on. But just to give you a fun frame of reference here for the Hersheys, if you look on the front porch, the beautiful urns that hold the flowers, those are original to the mansion. And this is to give you an idea about the Hersheys. Mr. and Mrs. Hershey picked those out themselves. They selected them, this is for everybody my age and older on the trolley, they selected them from a high-end boutique called the Sears and Roebuck Catalog. That's where the urns came from. Okay, down here in the hollow, there's a little one-room schoolhouse you can see right there. That is one of the schools that Mr. Hershey attended in his brief educational career. He was there in 1863, which makes him probably a first grader, second grader, somewhere right around there. His uncle Elias Hershey was his teacher. That's Henry's brother Elias. Okay, so I wasn't making that up either. Okay, now let's get back to Hershey and chocolate before we really get up close and personal with the original factory. I said that Mr. Hershey introduced the Hershey bar and he was selling it for a nickel. They actually did not change the price for the next 70 years, from 1900 through, or 1899, through 1969. The price of a Hershey bar was a nickel. And then they went completely bananas and they raised it to a dime. Okay. And they raised it to a dime. Now you can start to see the factory out there next to us a little bit more. The story of how the factory got there was that Mr. Hershey, like I said, was a millionaire in the caramel industry, started making chocolate, started loving the idea of chocolate, and decided to sell the entire Lancaster Caramel Company for $1 million, half cash, half stock, to the American Caramel Company, one of his competitors, and he used the proceeds of that sale to come here and build the world's largest chocolate factory, which is coming up ahead of us on your right-hand side. You'll see that and the cocoa bushes out front in just a moment, and again these beautiful homes that are on the other side of the trolley, left side of the trolley, as well as we kind of cruise up that way. Now, why did he come here? I mean, he didn't go back to New York, he didn't go back to Philadelphia. Well, we went by this creek a couple of times. That's good fresh water current, helping provide electricity and power for the plant. He also knew that he was coming to where the descendants of the Mennonites, the Pennsylvania Dutch, were living, and these big, burly German farm boys really wanted to get off the farm and do some factory work, and so that's exactly what he tapped into. And also because he revolutionized milk chocolate. So why not come to the heart of dairy country and put your factory rather than having it refrigerated and shipped to wherever you were happen to put your factory, when you could literally be with the cows practically walking in the front door asking to give their milk to you. So this is how we ended up with the factory in what became Hershey, Pennsylvania. They picked the ground in 1903. All these limestone boulders came out. Mr. Hershey said, "Oh, super, free building material. Break them apart, boys," and that's how we got the foundation of the factory here. This was the only Hershey chocolate plant in the world from 1905 to 1963. The only place where Hershey's chocolate was produced. The next factory was in Smiths Falls, Ontario, Canada, just in case you're trivia oriented. This factory employed over 3,000 people, and it was a manufacturing facility for 107 years. From 1905 to 2012, they made Hershey's chocolate in this plant, 24 hours a day. Now, by today's standards, they didn't make nearly as much. They could only I say, produce 33 million Hershey Kisses a day. They could wrap 1,500 Hershey bars a minute, which is 25 every second. As I said, it ran from 1905 to 2012, right here on Chocolate Avenue, which is where we're at. And there goes Cocoa Avenue. So we've done this big loop here. Now you're at the center of town again, where there's the bank and the department store. That's what's right next to us on either side here. And finally, your nice last close-up view of the original chocolate factory there. Oh, with the monorail going in front of it as well. There you go. Which is a beautiful segue to our next discussion topic here on the trolley. And that is, we have this town. You have a town. That's where you come from. Your town probably has the bank and a department store and a place where lots of people work, sure. Most towns have a park named after the town. It's a place for the people in that town, and we're no different. We have a park that's called Hershey Park. It goes all the way back to 1907 when Mr. Hershey built it for the town, and people would come and they'd go to the creek here and they'd go fishing and they'd go boating and they might play ultimate frisbee or watch a baseball game or a concert or something. And soon they started building roller coasters in 1923, and it became a little different maybe than the town park where you come from. Now there are 15 roller coasters and hundreds of rides of all size varieties, from scary to simple kid fun type things. One of my favorites is not this one, it's the red track one that we just went by, Storm Runner. That one actually does not take you up the hill, creeping slowly and then drop you. It shoots you across the plains first, hydraulically 0 to 72 in 2 seconds. Honest to goodness, no embellishment, you keep it on, and then up the hill, 100 feet in the air, and then it's built on the side of the hill, so you go 180 feet down. And then you have this roller coaster here. This is Lightning Racer, also one of my favorites. So basically, pro tip, if you're like me, when you go to Hershey Park, come in and go all the way to the opposite side and work your way back. So we go all the way over here, we ride Lightning Racer before anybody else gets here, and that's two cars that race each other through. They split apart and they duel each other 3 separate times during the course of the ride. And you never know who's going to win. Except that if you're riding with me, we're probably going to lose. I'm on a terrible losing streak on Lightning Racer. I don't know what's going on. Okay, now we're going to climb the hill here, and we're going to end up over by the Welcome to Hershey sign, but there's a lot to see and talk about in the meantime, so as I start to kind of wrap everything together here for you. So let's go back to the school for a second. Milton Hershey School. All right. Said that Mr. and Mrs. Hershey started the school because they couldn't have any kids. Okay, that happens to a lot of people. Not necessarily the starting of the school part, but they couldn't have any kids because Mrs. Hershey was very ill most of her adult life. And sadly, she passed away when she was still pretty young. She was only 42 years old when she died, and they'd only been married for 17 years. So we don't know what was wrong with her exactly, or their doctors labeled it an incurable nervous disorder. There would be times where she would be almost paralyzed, and then times when she would apparently make a near complete recovery. However, in 1915, she caught pneumonia, and just like his sister, she was not strong enough to fight off the infection, and she died in March of that year. So Mr. Hershey was devastated. He lost the love of his life. He was 15 years older than her. He was already into his 50s, and having to decide, what he would do with the legacy that he has, the town, the park, the chocolate company, and all of it. So basically, he took 3 years to sort of think it over and grieving. And in 1918, he very quietly and discreetly gave everything that he had to the only kids that he would ever have. Now that, of course, is the kids of Milton Hershey School, which you could probably have figured out. Yes. He considered them and all of the kids that came after them to be his kids. He didn't adopt any of them. They're not his own personal family or biological family, but the group of them, they always considered to be his kids and Catherine's kids. And so what did he do specifically? Well, he set up the Hershey Trust, which now operates out of the High Point Mansion, and to that trust in 1918, he signed over every single share of stock that he owned in his own chocolate company. 27 years before his death, valued at $60 million. He gave it all to the trust and said, this is the financial caretaker of my kids for as long as this school will last. And that's exactly what has happened. The trust today still is the financial caretaker of the school. The trust is the majority shareholder of a little company called the Hershey Company that makes Hershey bars and kiss-shaped products and all the rest of it. The trust is the sole owner of Hershey Entertainment and Resorts, which is Hershey Park and the Hershey Bears hockey team, and the Hotel Hershey, which will be coming into view on your right-hand side in just a moment. So the trust today is valued at somewhere in the area of $12 billion. The school is not only the largest private residential school of its kind in the country, it's one of the largest privately endowed schools in the entire world. I will say more on that a little bit later. I'll let you digest it for now. The beautiful Hotel Hershey 4-star resort is up there on the very top of the hill. You can kind of see it from different angles. And then the equally beautiful, but totally different category, Hershey Gardens are down the hill on our left side here. They've got thousands of roses and all sorts of other flowers, rock garden, herb garden, year-round butterfly house, which has gone crazy popular since they opened it. That was started in 1936, and the hotel built in 1932. And now we're going to sort of turn here, and you'll be able to see all of the whole Candy Kingdom laid out before you. But we're going to take our time getting down the hill. This is not alpine skiing. We're actually going to go a little ways, and then we're going to turn into this building here. This is our second exclusive proprietary view of the trolley. First one is the mansion, where we have exclusive rights to bring our guests there. And here, the school and we have been good friends for a very long time. So they let us bring our guests here to where that Welcome to Hershey sign is, right in front of the school. So we get a very, very nice view. Now, a lot of you may have thought this was Mr. Hershey's castle, the building up here, when you first came into town. It would make total sense. You know, beautiful, kind of looks over everything in the town. But this is actually where grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 attend school at Milton Hershey School. So this is their middle school. Now, you know, if you're carefully paying attention, when we were at Founders Hall, you're like, okay, that was the elementary school, and that was the high school, and they've taken the middle school kids, these kids ages roughly 11 through 14, and they've completely isolated them from the rest of society. And I say yes, I think that was one of their smartest decisions. Completely take the children in middle school and isolate them from the rest of society. Bring them back, you know, when they're around 14. I am just kidding for any of you actually in middle school. You're wonderful people and everyone loves you. Here we go. It's the front of the school here. I do feel a little bad for the kids here in one respect. Of course, if you're a middle schooler and you're trying to, you know, think of the Spanish word for apple or what Euclidean geometry is all about, and you're working your little tushy off and you look out the window just thinking, and lo and behold, everyone in the world other than you is at Hershey Park eating cotton candy and riding roller coasters and absolutely having the time of their lives, and here you are reading Gulliver's Travels. So that's, you know, I think that's a burden for the children, but hey, that's just my opinion. As we look down the hill here, you can see where we've been. Let's start towards the back of the trolley. That is the Giant Center. It's one of the first things we saw back there from 2002. And then over the top of that is the factory. You can see how it just stretches on and on there, just how huge that complex is. The only thing I don't have time to mention normally during the tour is what is behind the factory yet. Even higher up the hill, there's lots of low buildings and a complex of buildings there. That's the Milton Hershey Medical Center. It's one of the finest hospitals on the East Coast. And it actually is, ironically, the largest employer in the town of Hershey that has Hershey Park and the Hershey chocolate factories and all the rest of it, because Penn State University has their College of Medicine there, so all the faculty, all the students, residents, everybody, it comprises over 10,000 people at that facility. Right next to us is Chocolate World. That's where we started and where we will finish up. And then behind that, you've got the new Pandemonium roller coaster. And then the stadium here that I pointed out at the beginning for our concerts, that was built in 1939. The Philadelphia Eagles actually trained here in the 60s. The Hershey High School Trojan football team, which sometimes probably could take the Eagles, I think. I'm not 100% sure. But has their football games there. And then behind that, the old original arena. And then you've got the rest of Hershey Park down here. So you got your orange roller coaster, that's Fahrenheit, where you lay flat on your back. Well, you're sitting, but your feet are in the air and you're flat on your back. 90 degrees straight up, over the top, and then 97 degrees down and through. So it's like an upside down bulb over a thermometer there. And the red track I mentioned earlier, that's behind that. That is Storm Runner, the hydraulic launch roller coaster. Unless you've just eaten, in which case it's the hydraulic lunch roller coaster. And the Kissing Tower, the huge observation tower behind that, that's 285 feet, where you go up, your windows are shaped like Hershey Kisses, and yes, you are expected to kiss the person next to you when you get to the top. Maybe, kids sitting next to your mom, that's the one silver lining of the COVID era. You'd be like, Mom, wearing a mask. We can't kiss you on the ride. We're just going to have to gut it out till next time. Okay, so now we're come back to Hershey Park Drive and making our way towards Hershey's Chocolate World. It's been, I hope, a very entertaining and inspirational story for you so far. However, there's still a little bit more to tell, and it's still pretty amazing, so hear me out. The last thing we talked about was the trust, and we got onto that because of the grief over the death of Mrs. Hershey. Mr. Hershey did grieve her death significantly, and he actually left the country, went to Cuba for quite a long time. Now you could do that. It was free travel back in those days, and he loved the cigars, he loved the people, he loved the climate, he loved the cigars, and he also fell in love with the idea of how much sugar they could grow down there. Remember, several times I said, Mr. Hershey, the sugar bills were volatile, business was tough. He saw an opportunity to take advantage of that and to help himself out. And so he invested in about 65,000 acres of Cuban sugar plantations. Not only that, he also started a town that was so similar to Hershey, Pennsylvania, that they called it Central Hershey, Cuba. I say so similar because even down to a school for orphan children there, it was very, very much like his model town here in the middle of Pennsylvania. So we had Central Hershey. And for quite a while, Hershey was one of the world's major sugar producers as well. There was an era where Coca-Cola was made with Hershey's sugar, as was Wrigley's gum and lots of other things. So Mr. Hershey had lots of money. Okay, that's not a surprise at this point in our tour, sure. But in 1929, of course, the stock market crashed and initiated what we'll keep our fingers crossed, we hope is still the worst economic disaster of our nation's history. But it started the Great Depression. And Mr. Hershey looked at the situation, saw that it was going to be long, saw that it was going to be tough, and decided to preserve his town, his factory, and everybody that was here with as much as he could do. So he embarked on a huge building campaign that lasted the entirety of the Great Depression. If you were paying super careful attention to lots of the dates that I mentioned while we were looking at buildings and talking about them, you might have noticed a theme. The middle school, which was then the high school, was built in 1934. The hotel further up the hill was built in 1932. The gardens were planted in 36. The stadium with all the football and the concerts was 39. The original arena behind it was 37. When I said, actually I probably forgot to say the date, when I said, here's your last close-up view of the factory, that section of it was built in 35, and there were lots and lots of workers' homes and student homes and other building projects that took place all the way through the Great Depression. So Milton Hershey kept hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people employed at the factory, I'll come back to that in a second, and created hundreds and hundreds of more jobs for anybody who wanted or needed a job in the area. So unemployment was non-existent in Hershey. People flocked into Hershey for the jobs to keep going during the 1930s. And Mr. Hershey did keep the factory going full blast during the 1930s because, as we all know, depressed people want to eat chocolate, exactly right. And the Hershey bar cost a nickel. Still, even 30 years after it was created, it was still 5 cents. So if it was the worst day of your life, you were out of work, out of whatever, as long as you had a nickel in your pocket, man, you could still have a Hershey bar and salvage that day at least. So Mr. Hershey lived to see the end of the Depression. He turned into his 80s during that, 1937. Lived to see the end of World War II. He produced field ration D-bars for the armed services in support of the war effort, just about turned the factory over to their production throughout the early part of the 1940s. And he died on October 13th, 1945. So, 88 years and 1 month old exactly. Now, how did he live so long?
He ate lots of chocolate.
Exactly, but not just any chocolate. Hershey's chocolate. In fact, not even any Hershey's chocolate, Hershey's milk chocolate. Exactly right. Hershey's milk chocolate. So yes, and also a lot of cigars. But, you know, that's those were for his mental health, perhaps. That's what my doctor says anyway. Yeah, Mr. Hershey lived 88 years and 1 month, died right across the street from the place where he was born. There's a little brick building, well, it's a big brick building now, but that was the town's hospital at that point. And he had a stroke. He had several strokes in his 80s, but yeah, in October he had a stroke, and he died right across the street from the original family homestead. So, what do you want to remember about Mr. Hershey now that we're really coming back into the chocolate world? Well, of course, I mean, you knew lots of parts of the story of the chocolate and the park and all the stuff that we started this tour with. What you probably didn't know was the school, right, when we started, and that's critical because that is the core of the story of Milton and Catherine Hershey. They viewed those kids as their kids. I said the trust is worth $12 billion or so today. It's also very important to know that the trust does not take any outside inputs financially. There's no stimulus, no taxes, no donations, no contributions, no nothing. The trust relies on the Hershey Company's success and on the success of Hershey Entertainment Resorts, which means that, of course, you folks, every time you bite into a Hershey bar or a Kiss Shake product or ride a ride at Hershey Park or any of those things, you are contributing to the support of the kids at Milton Hershey School. So now the tables turn and you can feel pretty good about yourselves as human beings. You've been helping your fellow human beings this whole time and you probably didn't even know. So reach right around there, pat yourselves on the back. You are an excellent credit to your species, everyone. And hopefully this gives you an idea of a motto. It is the motto that Mike and I have followed for these many, many decades now. It's just 4 words, and I think that you can remember it. Here they are. Eat more Hershey's chocolate. Can you do that for me, folks? Yes, they can. Mike, I think the future is secure. Whew. Not that it was a close one, but I'm glad you guys are on the team. So that brings us back to Hershey's chocolate world, where you will certainly have the opportunity to eat more Hershey's chocolate because Kira is going to be out there with some Hershey products for you right when we get back from the trolley. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions off the trolley as well. I hope that you guys are having an incredibly safe and relaxing vacation and a great time in Hershey. I hope that we meet up again on the trolley under more normal circumstances. Yeah, in the meantime, enjoy yourselves and however long this lasts. And thanks again for riding with us today.